We have with us today on the internet, not in our studio as we usually do, the Ohio representative from the 29th District, Cindy Abrams. Cindy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me today. I truly appreciate the invitation.
Cindy, because this is your first term, could you take a minute to introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about your background and what you're bringing with you to Columbus?
Sure. I moved to the great state of Ohio 24 years ago to work for the Cincinnati Police Department as an officer. I worked as a patrol officer, and I worked for about 10 months in the Vice Unit, which was undercover drugs and prostitution. So again, moved here to the great state of Ohio 24 years ago to work for Cincinnati Police. We live in Harrison, Ohio. I am married and I have 2 teenage sons.
Now, you got to Columbus to start this session, and everything has been very different this year. Things are closed, things are happening. This is not a probably typical year for anyone to start in an office, but there's a lot going on. And when you go to your section of the website for the representatives, you can see how many bills that are being introduced and passed. So talk a little bit about what is happening, because I don't think people realize there's only one thing in the news right now, of course, and that's COVID. But there's a lot more going on in Columbus than just things related to COVID. So talk a little bit about what's going on.
That's right. So just to rewind a little bit, so I served on Harrison City Council prior to being appointed here to the Ohio House. So I do have local government experience, which I think is, it's so helpful when you're in Columbus, because, you know, I always check in with my local boots on the ground, whether it's, and we'll talk about the bills that I've introduced, whether it's professional police practices or something that's related locally to my cities, townships, and villages in District 29. I always check in locally before, you know, introducing something, because, you know, it's important to know, okay, how is this going to affect you, my boots on the ground? So it's important to have that. You know, I believe I come to Columbus looking through a very different lens, not just with my police background, but again, with local government experience. I believe that I have a very different, refreshing view at the State House. So in my first 10 months, you are correct. It has been an absolute whirlwind, and who would have thought we would have been hit with a global pandemic? But here we are, and, you know, truly doing the best that we can. You know, again, passed House Bill 197, which was the emergency legislation dealing with everything from, you know, again, giving people a grace period, renewing their license plate or their driver's license when the BMV was closed, and things like that. So I have learned something new. I used to say that I'm learning something new every day. Well, that has changed. I'm learning something new every minute, or so it seems. And yes, so it has been absolutely so busy. And you're right. Right now, we're hearing about COVID, but there's so much more going on. So a couple of the priority bills that I've introduced, we have right now, as you know, you've probably heard House Bill 703. Myself and Representative Phil Plummer have introduced that, and it's regarding professional police practices. And the governor, during his press conference, also gave, you know, an overview of what he would like to see as far as police reform. So what Representative Plummer and I have done, by the way, Representative Plummer served as the Montgomery County Sheriff for 10 years, and he served Montgomery County for 30 years as, you know, a deputy. So between us, we really know, we know law enforcement, and we have a lot of connections here still, the boots on the ground. So what we have done and what we are doing currently is we are on a listening tour throughout the whole state. And so we started in Columbus. We started with the state FOP, the Franklin County Chiefs, the Buckeye Sheriffs. We had just so many meetings initially through the last month or so. And then we came down here to the Cincinnati Police Academy and met with Chief Isaac and the command staff, because, you know, I'm totally biased being a graduate of their police academy, but I will say that a lot of the things in our bill and a lot of the things the governor is asking for, we are already doing here the Cincinnati Police Department, and in Hamilton County. So my goal was to bring my colleagues down to Hamilton County, to Cincinnati, and introduce to them what we do with the city of Cincinnati and the training, the extensive training, that through the police academy and continuing education and in-service. So we did that. And then our listening tour has continued this week with faith-based leaders in Cleveland, in Dayton. The NAACP has been invited to the table. Everyone's been invited to the table. I'll drive that point home. We have invited everyone to the table to have a conversation about our bill, House Bill 703, and to have a conversation. It is a placeholder bill, which means we have introduced it, and we are going to have extensive conversation before we come back this fall into committee, and then we'll start the legislative process, at that point with committee formally.
I love the listening tour, because I feel like right now that is the most important thing that absolutely everyone can be doing in absolutely every one of these situations, honestly, but also that you have said that you're not just visiting police organizations, which is really important that happens, but that faith-based organizations in the communities, that churches are the center of a lot of those neighborhoods, that's the key organization that will help you connect to all the regular people who are in those neighborhoods, who have concerns, who want to know, how do we work with the police? How do we get the police to work with us? And just that you are listening to absolutely everyone as part of creating this new system. And you talked about things that are already in place here. And I just last month got to talk to Commissioner Driehaus and Chief Tom Synan from Newtown on their Hamilton County Addiction Response Coalition, and how they have been a model. And I was really impressed, because hearing so much about the need for police reform, to see how much has already been happening in Hamilton County for the last 5 years, as far as making sure police officers don't have to be every piece of the puzzle, and how, as the chief of Newtown, he loves those tools that he does not have on his own, but addiction counseling and programs and things that as a police officer he doesn't have. So I love that part. Not to take over the conversation for a minute, but we have a lot going on here that is a model for different police forces across the nation that we can come and look at. So it's kind of nice to be able to say, hey, we've already thought about this. This is what we've got going on.
That's right. And I totally agree with that statement. And that program is fantastic. They've done a lot of good, because addiction is, obviously we're at epidemic, but it's devastating. It devastates communities and families. And what I will say though is, again, in Hamilton County, we had to, quite frankly, the collaborative agreement and the community policing and the change that Cincinnati had to go through. I mean, back in 2001, we had our round of riots then. I mean, we've come leaps and bounds since then. And I'm so proud of the positive change and the involvement with the community, and truly listening and making changes from that. Because again, a lot has changed since 2001 for the better. So in this bill, just to kind of touch on a couple things, what we're doing here, and Representative Plummer and I have made it clear in the press conference that we initially did when we introduced the bill back in June, we are standing with the police, okay? The vast majority of the policemen and women that we know are professionals. So we're going to treat them as such, and that's going to, we're taking a look at, and this is with not just the governor, we have the attorney general, the OPATA, all the training and that, so this is not just, simply what we want to see. There's multiple, people involved in this. And again, the boots on the ground, bringing this in front of chiefs and sheriffs and patrol officers and community faith-based leaders, everyone. So we are looking at basically having an oversight board, and it's going to be no different than when you're a doctor or a nurse or a pharmacist. You have a state board that you have to, come in front of, God forbid you do anything that could cost you possibly your license. So we are going to look at an OPATA professional board for our police officers. So if there is excessive use of force complaint or dishonesty, something, it's not going to be if you don't like me and you complain about me and it's really a false complaint. It's not going to be things like that. It's going to be very serious things that you come in front of the board because you possibly might lose your license to practice. So there's going to be that. Something else that's in the bill that, again, most larger departments are doing is a psychological test before you're hired. Again, in order to get hired by the Cincinnati Police, you have to go through the whole entire process. Again, the group psych, the one-on-one psych, it's multiple levels of, in your application process. It's not just the physical agility and the written test. I mean, there's multiple levels that you have to pass in order to be hired. So the psychological test before you enter the police academy. So that's going to be one thing that we're looking at. Training. We'd like to improve training. Again, the Cincinnati Police Department, their police academy is over 1,200 hours. And the state minimum is, I want to say 750. I'm probably going to get the number wrong because we've had a lot of numbers lately. As I told you a few minutes ago, my first 10 months has been full of learning something new every minute. So again, boosting training and letting the training be available, not just to the departments that have the resources and the revenue for it, but every officer across the state deserves that training because training is important. Training saves lives, period. And then a discipline database, which that is going to be available for police chiefs and sheriffs. They can log in and they can see. So for example, if officer from Department A decides they're going to leave Department A because they've been asked to leave, they've been given the AB plan, they decide to go to another department that maybe doesn't have the resources or the staff to do a proper background check and call around with, references and references. That officer, that chief of Department B can log into the database and see that this officer was basically let go, asked to leave, and the reasons why, as far as, whether it's again, your discipline, whether it's excessive use of force, dishonesty, whatever it is, that's going to be able to be logged in there, the chiefs are, so they can take a look. So we can prevent the officers from just jumping around from different departments and then something tragic happens and then you say, well, so that's kind of the highlights of the bill. So again, transparency is what we're looking at, oversight, training, and then recruiting. We want to recruit because let's face it, I mean, looking at the scenario we're in right now across the nation, we need the police, okay? Again, the vast majority of them are good. They're here to serve. They're here. They take an oath to protect and serve you. And they mean that. They mean that. They absolutely take that oath and they go out there every day and they protect people that they don't even know, strangers. And think about, I'll give one example, the Fifth Third shooting. Everyone's running away from Fifth Third Bank on Fountain Square, but here's our police officers running towards the scene and they're going to take care and stop the threat there. So again, I know that's kind of a extreme example of something, but it happens. And, there's no one other than the police that are going to come in and take care of that threat to society. So what we're doing again is we're going to get into, the schools early and educate, the kids like, hey, here's another career path that you can take. Be a police officer, because truly it comes from your heart. I'm not going to, people that take the oath, police officers that take the oath are special people. They are. And again, it's a calling in your heart to serve the community. So we're going to recruit and we're going to educate these young kids, because obviously, we need people to say yes and sign up and take the oath and serve the community well.
And possibly at the recruiting stage and this education stage, is the time where we can begin letting people know that, yeah, this is a profession for people who help, not people who are trying to be tough guys or something like that. And that's what we see normally most of the time. It really sounds like this House bill covers a lot of the concerns too. An oversight board, and people just want to know, is there really accountability? And the discipline database definitely solves the problem of, hey, how did that guy get rehired over there if there was a problem here? So it definitely looks like it's responding to concerns that people have had and that you're hearing. What kind of response are you hearing from the proposals in this plan? What kind of are you hearing people say, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for? You're hearing people saying, well, I have a concern about this.
The initial bill as introduced, we went through it again point by point with every organization that we talked to. We gave them the opportunity to go through each point. And there are some things that we've already taken off the table. Again, we are listening. And again, with a lot of the departments across the state, they're already saying, yep, we do this, we do this, we do this. And they're just kind of checking down the bill, which is great. It's great to hear that. But the recruiting keeps coming up with every department, large or small. The recruiting keeps coming up because, 20 years ago, you'd have, 4,000 or 5,000 people taking the test for the city of Cincinnati, and that's not the case today. And even the small departments, I mean, they would have, hundreds of people taking the test, and that's not the case today. So everyone is needing a good, solid recruiting program, again, to get into the schools. And I think it's so important to have officers, whether it's in the schools or whether it's just on the beat in the neighborhood, getting to know everybody. That's what it's about. Because, they're human behind the badge and the body armor. It's a fact. So, and they're there truly to help you. And I know I'm totally, everyone's like, well, you see it one way, but I don't think it's a negative way of seeing it. Like, I'm telling you that they're human. Do they make mistakes? Absolutely. Again, absolutely, they're human. But guess what? 9 times out of 10, they're there to help. And this bill will get rid of the officers that are there to harm. That's just a fact. So,
well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking the key of getting to know the people in your community and having officers that are connected to the people in your community. It's the same way you are connected as a representative, as you kept saying, to the boots on the ground, to the local people who are in the community. Is there's accountability in that. They all know who you are and you know who they are. But also, you are less likely to stereotype someone if you know them. They're not just a face and you're just going to make a guess about who they are. If you know them, if there are personal connections, if you know this neighborhood, if they all know you, that in itself becomes one of the controls, one of the accountability measures in that kind of process. And if you can increase the number of people you recruit, you can pick the better quality candidates.
That's right.
So that also helps.
It does. It does. So I will say, just really quick, shifting gears back to something you said made me think about something I'm doing personally here with the district. When I was appointed in October and then I hit the ground running, of course, I took a district tour, which I visited every city, township, and village in the district. I initially started there at the local city, township, and village meetings just to introduce myself and give a little State House update, which I will continue to do. Again, I am accessible. I am available. My email, the phone number, I can give that later and you can put it on the screen or whatever you want to do. I mean, you already know how to get a hold of me, of course, because here we are. But again, I am proud of being accessible. And if anyone says, well, I don't know how to contact her or she's, never around. Well, guess what? I can't be around right this second because we're not having events and in-person meetings. I mean, some places are now just getting started again, but I absolutely am available and I want to hear from you. Again, you email in, you call, you're going to get a response. So, and we spent during the quarantine, just kind of quick little topic too. I mean, we spent hours here, like I'm here in my home, just helping people with unemployment issues and helping people with, I mean, it was that whole system is being looked at too to make improvements. You can absolutely bet that. So
I know that system was never designed to handle the kind of
no.
volume that it's seeing right now, unfortunately. And I know that John Husted has talked about different updates that they're trying out to try to keep it going and make it more smooth.
Right.
I think, though, that what you're saying about being accessible is really important. One of the reasons we do these programs at Waycross is because generally people, when it comes to their government, of course, they're familiar with the national level. They might be familiar at the state level. Of course, right now we're all seeing a lot of our governors at the state level because of daily conferences. I don't think people realize that they have all the time, some do, that they have a local connection. There is someone from their community who goes to Columbus and actively engages in that state level of government with just their community in mind and how things will impact things back here. So, and how accessible you are. It's Columbus can seem far away sometimes from Cincinnati and from Harrison and Forest Park and Coleraine Township. But if you're sitting in Coleraine Township, you are an accessible person that can stand in for them and can also explain to them what's going on, which is what we're doing today, hopefully finding out what's going on.
And that's really important too. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's sometimes things you hear, whether it be on social media or wherever, and then what the reality is, like, here's what we're really doing. You know, like, just to take unemployment really quick, people were upset because there was a delay, rightfully so, between the $600 federal CARES Act money coming to them immediately. Well, the state of Ohio didn't have set up, none of the states, and 50 states didn't have set up to take that money from the feds because it's never happened before. So we needed time to figure out, okay, how are we going to, you know, get this to the people, which they are now, thank goodness. But again, it was very stressful, and I absolutely, we took every single email and call, and we helped, you know, as much as we could. That being said, yes, I do live here, and I am in Hamilton County. I'm raising a family, and I go to Columbus to work, but then I come back here. I live here. I go out to eat here. I shop here. As a matter of fact, I was just in JCPenney's yesterday looking for some draperies for my home, because that's kind of hard to buy online. At least I think it is. So the point is, yes, I am absolutely here in the community. So a couple of things I've been working on too, just to kind of touch on a couple more bills I think that are very important and very relevant here to our county. So House Bill 431, which is creating the sexual exploitation database, is over in the Senate now. And that was one of the very first pieces of legislation to cross my desk. The Attorney General's office came in, and with my law enforcement background, they said, you know, what do you think about having a database that would be public? And, you know, this is specifically targeting our pimps and johns, you know, when they're caught soliciting. Well, I said, I'm all for this, because the two questions that the John asks when they're arrested is my job going to find out? Number one. And then, is my wife going to find out? So, you know, we went through again the committee process and talked to a lot of different people, a lot of law enforcement agencies, a lot of vice units, and we came up with this sexual exploitation database. So I'm really proud of this. Do I think it's going to make a difference on the street? Absolutely, I do, because there are neighborhoods here in Hamilton County that are absolutely devastated by the cycle of abuse, and the prostitutes. I mean, let's call it what it is. You know, these mostly women, they are victims, and they are abused, and it's a devastating cycle that can be broken. But they need, again, the proper help, and things like Change Court. Judge Heather Russell here in Hamilton County, again, a fantastic program that truly helps. So that's one bill that is over in the Senate, and they will resume hearings here this fall when we come back.
That's really important, because we talked about databases in other aspects as a way of increasing accountability, and there's more accountability with that. How do we have the pimps and the johns, the ones that are victimizing and not the victims, be responsible? So I think that's a really important aspect to that. And also it's a reminder that we have more going on right now in Ohio and in Columbus than COVID. As well, as much as it's completely taking over our world right now, there's other things haven't stopped, which is important, because you kind of worry that progress that was being made in other directions halts or even goes backwards. So it's really important to know that that's still going on. What else? What other kind of things do you think people might not be aware is still going on in Columbus?
So one more bill that I worked on, and then we'll go into a couple that that have been signed, which is exciting. So House Bill 680 basically guarantees in-person election day. Obviously, what happened on March 17th was devastating and very confusing for our voters. And, you know, the vast majority of people in Ohio like to cast their vote in person. So now House Bill 680, we partnered with Secretary of State Frank LaRose and basically created a plan to guarantee election day. Now, if you want to vote absentee or in person, you know, the state of Ohio, first of all, we'll talk about it. We have such a great opportunity for you to vote. I mean, there's no reason not to cast your ballot. You got, you know, in-person voting at the Board of Elections 30 days prior. You can request your absentee ballot today. You can literally print it out from the Board of Elections and mail it in, and they will mail you your ballot when it's time. This bill also allocates and lets the Secretary of State spend the Federal CARES Act money, mailing everyone the absentee ballot request for this general election, as we have in even years for almost a decade. So that's what I heard from my office after March 17th. In my office, what I heard from my constituents here in District 29 was, we want to vote in person, period. I heard it loud and clear. So here we are. And again, if you don't want to go out to the polls, that's totally fine. If you aren't feeling well, or if you aren't able to come out, or if you're afraid to come out because of COVID, that's totally fine. Request your absentee ballot, you know, send that request in today, and you can get that ballot and vote from the safety of your own home. And again, mailing it in, you could drop it off at the Board of Elections in the secure drop box out front. You know, there's multiple ways in Hamilton County to be able to vote. So that's over in the Senate now.
That I'm just going to revisit a couple things that I think are really important. I want to make sure people hear about that. Is that having an election day in person is the primary goal of that, and to make sure it happens, and to make sure that it's when we think it's going to be. Because you're right, that was an absolutely confusing, I think, just a lot of people who had planned to vote in person, and then things changed, and then things changed again, and nobody knew. Election morning, they woke up and they didn't know what was the election on or was the election not off. So there was definitely a need to make sure that we take seriously how important it is that that happens when it's planned and consistently. The right to vote is how we participate all at home in the election. And people think about that on presidential terms, and but there are so many local races that are decided by just a couple votes. So it really is important that everybody has that access. But also, Ohio is, of the different states I've lived in, the easiest state I have been in that to get an absentee ballot. And it's always been that way. That's not a new, well, it's not always been that way, but it's been that way for quite some time. So that's not a new development. So if anybody is concerned about going in person or what it's going to be like in November, and I'm not sure yet, they can request that absentee ballot now. They can just go to the website, click the form. But having everyone get mailed that request would certainly cut down on the number of people at poll sites. So if that's a concern, then that's an element of this bill that I think people should be able to get behind, because that is some people's concern, is how can we get fewer people squished in one polling location at one time? Well, absentee ballots would take care of that. But then being able to go and vote in person if you want to, and if you need to. Sometimes you just don't know an issue's on the ballot that you need to be there for until it's too late to get an absentee ballot. So I think it's important to make sure that that's available, to make sure you want to make sure that every possible way to vote is available to people.
Right, and it is. And in Ohio, I'll add that voting by mail is safe and secure. I want to say that. I want to drive that home. I mean, if you've never done it, you'll get, once you send away, you fill out the application, you send it into the Board of Elections. The staff there verifies that that's you. That's why you have to physically sign it. You have to physically mail it in. You know, you've got your last four of your social, your driver's license number. These are things that, you know, they're verifying. Then they mail you the ballot. Same thing. There's an outer envelope. There's all this verification that it's really you voting. So rest assured, Ohio is safe and secure, and we're proud of that. We've, again, made it law that you cannot just go and, you know, harvest ballots and turn in, you know, 50 ballots from Lord knows who. So in Ohio, that's absolutely, our elections are safe and secure, and we're proud of that.
And their military has been voting by absentee ballot for a very long time. Mm-hmm. I've been a poll worker, and I had to vote absentee ballot because I was not ever actually working the polls in my own precinct. Mm-hmm. So this is something that the Board of Elections has had to figure out, which is nice, because it's not something on the list of, oh, this is another new thing we have to figure out. This is something that how to keep that secure has always been on their agenda. So, right. And really, people in nursing homes who can't go to the polls, there have long been reasons before COVID that people could not get to the polls. Sure. So making it accessible, and then being able to go up to 30 days before an election in person anyway to the Board of Elections and not worry about getting it mailed is an amazing opportunity. As I said, I've lived in other states where that wasn't available, and I like it when I see people take advantage of different ways to make sure you can connect to vote. Because, and I admit it's my own little platform, that there's a lot on your ballot besides the presidential election, and it's the stuff that affects your life more directly. It's the stuff, it's who's going to be in charge of your town, who's going to be in charge of your school district, any local issues that have to do with where you live. That's the stuff that if you feel like, gosh, I don't know if I have an impact with this ballot, you have an impact on that local stuff, and that's the stuff that affects your daily life. So that's my, as an aside, please go to the Board of Elections website, and you can even look at the sample ballot before you go vote.
Right. And I agree with you. Every election counts. Every single vote counts. I mean, it makes such a difference. Like you said, I mean, local races have been won literally by one vote. And so, you know, whenever someone says, oh, you know, my vote doesn't really count. Oh, it does. It really does. So again, got to get out there and vote.
Yes, thank you for hearing me on that. That is a constant rant that I have. Please, there's more on your ballot. Please go vote every single election. Primaries are important, and off-year elections are important, and all the issues that show up on your ballot, you know, read about those, and you can find out what they are ahead of time. And of course, at Waycross Community Media, here's my plug. At Waycross Community Media, we are going to focus on those local races and those local issues that you're maybe not hearing about on the larger commercial stations. So, because if you want to cast a research vote, then you have the next challenge of, how do I find out about those smaller local races? So, right. Which is great, which is what we're doing right now. We're getting the chance to introduce the 29th district to you, their Ohio representative in Columbus, doing things for them. And that's what we're doing today. So thanks again for coming on to do that. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to make sure we get to talk about? Oh, well, there's some things that have been signed that are now law. So we haven't talked about that. Let's make sure we do that.
Yes, the governor signed House Bill 11, which was priority legislation for the Ohio House. And Hamilton County is one of the counties that are in there that's eligible to receive the grant. So basically it reduces infant mortality, which is a obviously we want to reduce infant mortality. Very serious topic, devastating when it does happen. So yes, basically what it does, there's multiple things House Bill 11 does, but basically reduces that infant mortality by offering grants to certain counties where infant mortality is high. And it's basically educating and taking these moms basically into programs and educating them about their health, prenatal care, covering dental visits, with Medicaid, because that's important too, to keep, get your teeth cleaned and whatnot. So that is House Bill 11. So again, proud to support that. One thing I do want to say too, towards the end, I will continue my district tours throughout the district, visiting the local city, township, village, and school board meetings once everything resumes. And again, if anyone has anything I can help them with or anything you want to bring to my attention that's a state matter, you can email me at rep29@ohiohouse.gov, or you can call my office at 614-466-9091.
And I'm just going to exhort people that that's important to communicate with your state representative. I have heard so many situations where a bill was enacted because of a concern that a resident brought to their representative, and then that otherwise the representative would not have known about. And then a problem was solved. And it might be something that needs legislation, or it might just be something that needs the connections that you have that we don't necessarily have at home. So it's really important that there is an email address and a phone number that people can connect to you and contact you and share concerns and ask questions. And I appreciate that. I appreciate how accessible that is and that we have access to that.
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking some time to catch us up on things that are happening. Obviously, almost every day we see a press conference from Columbus right now, but we're not hearing about all of these other things that are going on. I think knowing that legislation is being enacted that has to do with non-COVID things, but that are really important, like infant mortality.
You mentioned that sometimes we enact legislation based on a concern or a problem, or that sentence that you just said, that jogged my memory. So House Bill 44, the athletic trainer, I didn't even know this blew my mind. So I'm all about common sense legislation, right? So I'm a common sense type girl. So if something doesn't make sense, I say, this doesn't make any sense, and I'm not sure, why this is what it is. So did you know that at this very moment, I'm just going to use football because I'm a football mom. So on the sidelines of the high school football, most high schools have an athletic trainer. The athletic trainer cannot give the student athlete, a Tylenol. They cannot administer insulin if they're having a diabetic emergency. They cannot start an IV to give them fluids if they are dehydrated. So when I found that out, I thought, this doesn't make any sense. And Representative Carfagna and I sponsored House Bill 44, which basically revises the athletic trainer's scope of practice. Has not been looked at in almost 30 years. So 30 years ago, that might have been okay. But what's happening today is there's an athletic trainer on the sidelines of most high school football fields and athletic fields. And the athletic trainer is still working under the umbrella, and the physician makes the final decisions as far as diagnosis and whatnot. But this bill will give that athletic trainer the authority to basically give the Tylenol, start the IV of fluids, give the insulin, because these can save a life. The athletic trainer should never have to decide between, do I follow the law or do I save a life? Let them save a life of these student athletes, because I know you've seen about it in the news. I mean, these kids dehydrate. It's devastating. And not even kids. I mean, there's NFL players that have passed away because they were severely dehydrated. So again, athletic trainers are super important. They play a super important role, especially here on the sidelines in Hamilton County of our high schools. So that's another common sense one that I was like, are you kidding me? So it gave me much comfort to see that athletic trainer on the side of the football field. But then I found out, like, wow, so let's let them do that. Let's let them practice to their full scope. I mean, they have most of them have, well, they all have obviously college degrees, but most of them are master's degrees. So let them practice.
Yeah, and as a parent of someone who's been a high school and a college athlete, you really want to see that everyone on that deck can step in quickly. Time is everything when you're talking about needing fluids or needing, being dehydrated and needing insulin. So, and you're right, we've seen too many news stories that were really tragic. I want to really thank you for taking some time to explain to us some of the things going on in Columbus. I think we have been, of course, we daily see what's going on with COVID, and it's great that we get a chance to see that. But I think that it's difficult to keep up or be aware of so many other things that are going on. And sometimes back home we hear about bills and numbers, and we hear 44 and 11 and 107, and we don't know what that means and how that connects, how those numbers connect to things that we do on a daily basis in our daily life. And I also want to take a minute to encourage people. You gave us contact information that we should absolutely, definitely make sure that if we have any questions, to go ahead and contact you. You are our connection to what's going on in Columbus when we can't be there. And it's great that we have that connection, so we want to make sure we take advantage of it. Thank you again. And is there anything else that you want to make sure that we have a chance to let people know?
And there's one more website. You can go to CountyOhio.gov at any time, and you could look up any type of legislation, any of these House bills that we mentioned or any other House bill. You can type, there's a search button there, and you can search anything you'd like. So yes, OhioHouse.gov.
That's really important. And anybody who's watching and thinking, I wonder what any particular representative is working on, you can click, every representative has their own page, and you can click on it and you can find out which bills are being sponsored and which bills are with committees that you're working on. And I think it's important. That's how we can keep connected to things that you're doing. So thank you.